Jake, we are back for week 3. Week 2 went well. Very well. I don't know what to say other than just it went well. Totals, the A grade totals went 4-0. The B grade totals went 3-0. So the totals
those left and right.
Yeah, the totals that we gave out on show went 2-0. So the recommended A plus show totals went 5-0, which is pretty good. On the sides, we went 2-1 on the A grade sides, and we're 5-4 on the A grade sides with a nice little 38% ROI because we're mostly taking underdogs on these, and the favorite taking are pretty short. I always like to default to the underdogs, lean that direction. Sometimes it doesn't happen. In baseball this year, we've played a few more favorites than I like, and thankfully we've won more to keep that up. But I kind of like taking these dogs where you're getting plus odds on 50-50 games. Football is weird. Sports are weird. Humans are weird, right? And that's really paid off for us. Combined, if you have taken the A grade plays plus the show plays, overall for the season, 15-9-1 with a 29% ROI on the season. Last week, 8-2. No pressure on you to repeat this performance because we talk about the A grade plays, but then you're kind of to build. So hopefully you can continue the magic of picking the right B and C grade plays to add to the A grade plays that we love.
Yeah, I'm just sad we can't go back to Atlanta this week because Atlanta at home. Desmond Ridder hasn't lost a home game since I think high school.
He did really well at Cincinnati for sure. That was an impressive win against Green Bay this last weekend in a game that was slated to be a toss-up, and Model thought it was going to be a toss-up as well. It came down to the end. That was a good one, but I think the benefit actually of Week 1 playing Atlanta was less about playing Atlanta at home and more about fading Carolina, which we will be talking about later in the show. So don't want to spoil that, but we will be talking about, I think the reason we won that Week 1 Atlanta pick, and that was because their opponent is truly terrible. Just as a reminder for everyone, we have one more time.
You're making us look smart.
Seattle making us look smart. The Lions are now up to 16th in sideline ratings, so they're climbing on up. The Jaguars are not. We'll talk about the Jaguars later. We're still kind of taking a stance on a couple teams. We'll talk about those teams. I've mentioned this on Discord, and sometimes I don't do a great job. I'm not a salesman. I'm not an advertiser. I'm not a marketer. Sometimes I do a bad job communicating these things. But just as a reminder, the stance is the model stake. We're not going to hit every single one of them. We're just going to hope to hit more than we miss. And that's what's happened through the history of my modeling of these things is we've taken some stances on some teams and kind of constantly backed and faded certain teams. And we're not saying that we're going to go 100% on those stances. I could be completely wrong on Jacksonville, but we're going to fade Jacksonville most weeks, and we're going to have other stances we've been taking, and it works more than it doesn't. And so that's kind of the idea of this is we're not trying to say I'm not trying to say I know everything. We're just trying to say what we're picking up in the model, deviating from the market. Jake, I'm curious your thoughts on this. We haven't talked about this, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. It feels to me personally like there's a little bit of groupthink that happens in the NFL, and I don't know if that's the case with the sharpest bettors, the big money groups out there, the ones that act like hedge funds, and we know those exist. I'm not part of one of those, but I don't know if they do that as much either. But it kind of feels in the NFL like, in college football, kind of the same thing where you kind of get some opinions from some people and everybody just kind of parrots the same opinions. And so if you don't have that same opinion, you'll look kind of like you're out alone. And I'm looking at things going, do people really think these things like the Jaguars are good? Or is it just they made the playoffs last year and they heard somebody say something that they like them and everyone's just kind of biting them? That's what it feels like to me because I'm like, I don't know how you're getting these opinions unless you're just listening to the same sources. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's something in football in general. It's very easy because you've got weeks in between games and football's the biggest moneymaker, so everybody wants to talk about it. So you just end up hearing the same opinions over and over and over, and that just makes you end up thinking it's true kind of thing. And, it's kind of like preseason rankings in the college football. It's just they're bad. You had Tennessee up there inside the top 10. That's not good. It's just,
and you as a Tennessee fan were down on day one.
yeah. I've never felt safer about that underpick. But it's just. I think, like I said, there's just so much time where they're trying to fill dead air with football stuff, and you just have 7 different people saying the same opinion, and it just kind of gets assumed to be true.
And it feels, and I could be wrong on this, but it feels like you have some people out there, and everyone knows who they are, the contrarian people who I think are popular because that's what they do. But it almost feels like they're contrarian to be contrarian rather than. I mean, there's certain things that I would hear on the talk shows and the NFL, the pregame shows, whatever. I'd be like, absolutely, completely agree with that. And there's things I hear, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't agree with that. And that's the thing. You should be able to say I agree with some of it and disagree with some of it. But it feels like there's a lot of agreements in a lot of things. And then the people who disagree are just going to be, they're just disagreeing with everything because that's just their brand. And I don't know. It's like there's just not a lot of free thinking out there. And I take a little bit of criticism for it, but it works. It's worked out so far, and hopefully it'll continue to work out for us. Where again, we have a player-based model that tracks historical data on these players, updates, and some of these rankings shift around a lot just based off of injuries. Some of these key guys getting injured, moving teams up and down, and sometimes an injury happens, it doesn't affect much because the backups. Right? That's the benefit of a player-based model. So hopefully we can continue our winning ways. And so we'll get right to it here. Thursday night, Jake, you got us the winner last week in the Thursday night game. We're going to be looking for the same, recipe here because I don't think there's a great mathematical edge on this game. It's kind of hard to think there's going to be one. The Niners should be favored. They're at home and they're the much better team. We'll talk about some of the better teams, but my model really has a split after 5. It's kind of a jumble at the top. The top 5 teams, I think, are all kind of interchangeable. And we'll talk about most of those today. Pretty big gap to 6. And then it's kind of 6 through 10, and some of them are interchangeable. And a couple of them I'm not even sure should be there, but it really gets murky after that top 5. Niners, one of those top 5 teams, really good. The Giants are really bad. Saquon Barkley, the cherry on top to that situation. But you saw the Giants look really good against Arizona for a solid quarter and a half, maybe 2 full quarters, I guess, maybe the whole second half. But the other 6 quarters of football they've played have been dreadful. You see the ratings on screen. San Francisco, really good defense. Giants, not a really good defense. And that's not really pace inflated. That's just, there's just not a lot of talent on the Giants on defense, and there is for the 49ers. 49ers offense, drugged down a little bit by a slower pace. Still very good. Number 2, wide receiver tight end combination. Number 5 at running back, obviously Christian McCaffrey is very good. Brock Purdy, solid enough, rising in the rankings, continuing to impress. The issue is, should you lay a big number or not? Model says the 49ers win by an average of 12.2 points. We're doing a lot of money lines. This week there's a lot of big numbers, and this is one where the money line I think is actually not the smartest play because it's really out there. Football can get weird. We're a little more comfortable laying to 10, only a C grade, kind of a high C grade. It's like a C plus pick. It doesn't quite get to that B grade value, but San Francisco minus 10, worth an investment. Jake, what are your thoughts as to why the people should lay it with the 49ers and probably lay it earlier in the week? Because I have to imagine this number is just going to go up.
Yeah, I don't see this number going down at all. The defense, for one. I mean, the Giants are already struggling. Anyway, it took them a half a game to figure out how to score on the Arizona Cardinals. And they're just a mess of a franchise at the moment. And the Giants aren't any better. I mean, Daniel Jones is – I think he gets a little more criticism than he deserves, but such is the quarterback's life. But at the same time, he's never a guy that's going to go out and win you a game. He's a guy that more or less keeps you going. And without Barkley to help, his receivers aren't great. Jalen Hyatt was their leading receiver on 2 catches last week. And Darren Waller is good, but I don't know if he's going to be able to carry this team, and especially against the San Francisco team that's just loaded on defense everywhere. And I don't know
defense.
Don't know how you get in the way of them. And then on offense, Purdy seems to make all the right decisions. He's just turning out to be actually pretty good football player, and
a pretty good football player.
Yeah. But then you got guys like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk, and then
I have to say, watching Ayuk, I was not able to watch all of week 1 before week 2. Had I watched the 49ers game before week 2, I would have absolutely put a claim on him in fantasy because that guy looks really good. He was fantastic for them in week 1. And I mean, they've got, like you said, they've just got so many weapons.
Yeah, it's loaded. And I mean, even Juwan Jennings coming off the bench when I kind of went down, came in, did well. They're just loaded everywhere. And Kittle, I think I normally don't like winning double digits in the NFL, but this is one I feel pretty safe on.
Yeah, we talked week 1 about the Giants, right? Daniel Jones, I've got him right now as the 14th best quarterback. We've talked a lot about Discord on this. Once you get past the top like 8 or 9 guys, it's just a hodgepodge between him. And I still think Jared Goff's probably pulling up the rear in that group at like late 20s or something. But like 10 through 25 is like just a point apart, basically, in terms of this. I mean, there's just, I think by the end of the season, there might be some separation there because you got some guys in there like Tua who, has had some concussion issues. And if he can play a full healthy season, he maybe separates himself from that. Stafford's in that group because missing last year, but he, and a couple of interceptions, he's got a chance to separate himself. So there's a couple guys in that group. Garoppolo look decent enough. He might. So there's some guys in that group that can separate themselves out, but there's just a lot of, who the heck knows? And Daniel Jones is in that more for his legs than his arm. No one would say that he's the best thrower. He's Justin Fields. Justin Fields is the more extreme version because Fields is a worse passer and a better runner. But Daniel Jones is stronger running than passing. The Giants' offensive line better at the run block than the pass block. We talked about it week 1, and things went south for them really fast against the Cowboys with that blocked field goal return for a touchdown, got them out of their game. Their game plan is run the ball. Daniel Jones run the ball. And do just enough on offense, to hang into games. That's their game plan. Well, Saquon Barkley out. Their running backs ranked 29th now. It could be hard to run the ball.
I think it's Matt Breida that's going to get most of the carries. And
and so
a fabulous guy, but ooh.
Sure, yeah. Like we talk about a lot of these guys. I'm sure they're good people, but right, or maybe they're not. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never met any of them. But it's not a situation set for success here for the Giants. I think everyone kind of knows that. We've been leaning towards underdogs. We're going to take a big dog later in the show. This is one where I think you're going to lay it with the Niners here. I'm really buying into this team. They've got so many offensive weapons. And defensively, they are just stout. And I don't see the Giants having a lot of success on offense against this 49ers defense. So we're going to lay it with the 10. Model says the 49ers win by an average of 12.2 points, which takes us to Sunday. One of the Los Angeles teams versus Minnesota. This one will be the Chargers and Vikings. Model thinks the Vikings should be slight favorites in this one, that they win by a little bit more than home field advantage. This is a very interesting matchup. I don't think anybody saw these two teams being 0-2 coming into this game. 0-2 is not a death sentence in the NFL, but it's whatever one step shy of that is. The history of teams to start 0-2 and make the playoffs is not very good. Now, part of that is bad teams tend to start 0-2. So part of it's a little bit of that, but part of it is, you start putting yourself in a hole. Why are you losing? What's going wrong? 0-3 becomes really tough. I'm not saying that the loser of this game's out, but it's going to be a long road ahead for either one of these teams. The extra playoff spot helps, right? That we've added that, but it's going to be a tough task for the loser of this game. It should be a good contest. I think both these teams are decent enough. Again, teams are jumping up and down in the ratings based off the injuries. Obviously, Eckler, being out is a big deal. He's one of the best players in football, and he just adds a level of dynamicness to that offense. And the backups did not look good last game. Will that change? It's one game, right? We don't overreact to it, but he might be one of those running backs that matters. We'll talk about another running back that matters in the next game as well. So that kind of affects things. The interesting thing here, when we look at those grades, pace for the Chargers ranks 5th, for the Vikings 23rd. Two very different styles of football here. But the Chargers defense also really bad. Against the pass, ranks 18th. Against the run, dead last. And so the Vikings, will they try to take advantage of that? Of course, they've got a pretty solid quarterback in Kirk Cousins. They've got some guys who can catch the ball as well. They've got good run blockers, but not a great running game. So I don't know what the Vikings' plan of attack will be. If they have to take advantage of a weaker Chargers defense if they want to win. On the other side of the ball, of course, Justin Herbert, also a very good quarterback, good set of pass catchers there as well. So it should be interesting to see how it plays out with two teams that we thought would be better than this, but just haven't been. Model says 56% for Minnesota. This game's priced like it's a coin toss. This game's priced as if the Chargers are the better team, and going on the road balances it out. I actually think the Vikings are the better team right now with who's healthy on the field. Part of that's Eckler and the drop-off that incurs for them. Jake, what are your thoughts on this A-grade play back in the Vikings here at a nice price of -110?
I love the price at home. I think Minnesota has got the better overall team. I think, obviously the defense is better. The offense, I think, if they could figure out, I think Minnesota's one of the teams that should try to make a move for Jonathan Taylor, get him out of Indianapolis. Because look at, if you compare last year to this year, that's the big difference. They really don't have a running game going without Dalvin Cook. Put Taylor in there, I think this team will jump up the rankings because just having that threat helps out. Because Cousins,
like I said, they've got an O-line that's grades out really well run blocking, just not anything behind them to actually hand the ball to.
Yeah, if I can't ever say his last name, Matheson or whatever, just would hold on to the ball. And just fall forward. That would be enough because just to give Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson just a chance to breathe would be nice. And I think that's what's going to happen. I just don't trust the Chargers defense, especially with Eckler. And Eckler has been a little injury prone throughout his career. As speaking as one of the owners of him in fantasy, I love it when he plays because he's great. And it seems like there's 2 or 3 games every year where he's just sitting out. And then last year coming in, I think he said he wanted to have less carries, and then the backups aren't helping out, so he doesn't get that. So and I feel sorry for Justin Herbert. I feel like he is a very, very good quarterback, but just feels like unlucky and can't win games. When it comes down to it. And I think the same kind of thing happened to him at Oregon. So it might be something with him. I don't know, but I think he's very good. I just don't think that his defense is going to do enough to help him out in this game.
Alexander Mattison ranks as the worst starting running back according to Sideline. Backup, not great either. So, like you said, the Vikings are hurting there. Of course, the Chargers aren't in much better shape because Joshua Kelly ranks even worse than Madison does. You're talking about some very bad running backs. And of course, with how bad Kelly looked, the talk is, would one of the younger guys, Dotson or Spiller, get some looks, but neither one of them grade out well yet. Of course, they're young guys, so they don't have a ton of data. So maybe one of them comes up and is kind of a revelation for them. But I think that the talk was in the preseason that Kelly had solidified as the backup. But after what happened last week, I don't know if that's the case. Eckler will be out for another few weeks based off his movement to the IR. So they're going to have to figure out something, or else they're going to be by the time he comes back, in such a hole they can't dig out of it. This is definitely one of those games. I'm not saying that, the Vikings will for sure win the game. I feel like the 49ers probably will for sure win the game. I don't, but the price is really high and weird things happen in sports. And so, it's a very different setup. It's not that the Vikings we think are for sure going to win just at home. We think they're a slightly better team. -110 offers a great price to invest in. If you've been following me for any time, you know that we're always thinking about the price. That's what's going to give us those long-term profits here. A little trivia for you, Jake, just because I did not realize this. I was thinking to myself today, why do I not remember Austin Eckler in college? I was like, where did he must have went to some small school? Jake, I'm going to give you, first off, do you know where he went to school?
I don't know. I've got a couple of guesses, but I don't know.
Well, you're first off, you're wrong. I'm going to actually give you the list of schools that offered him a scholarship. There are 4 schools that offered him a scholarship to play football. Okay. I'm going to list them in alphabetical order. Number 1, Adams State. Number 2, Shadron State. I might be
the powerhouse. Yep.
Number 3, Oklahoma Panhandle State. Not Oklahoma State, Oklahoma Panhandle State. And number 4, Western Colorado. Those are the 4 schools that offer him a scholarship. No, those are like actual like 4-year universities that are all like D2, D3, NAI. I don't know what they are. Those are the 4 schools that offered him scholarships.
That's unreal that he has turned out to be, man.
Completely agree. It is bonkers. The correct answer is Western Colorado was the school that he went to. But yes, I was like, I've not even heard of any of those 4 schools. Some of our viewers, I'm sure, have. They live near them or friends or something. It's one of those places. But just bonkers. He's like the only guy I can think of in the NFL that I'm like, because some of the guys, they go to like 1AA schools or D2 schools. But I'm like, I've heard of those places. But I was like, I've never even heard of the 4 places that offered him a scholarship. I thought that was fun. Fun little nugget for our viewers there. We'll move on to the next game here, Tennessee and Cleveland. Okay, so much talk about this game. First off, model's high on both these teams. Is the model right or wrong, right? Well, of course, remember the old saying in statistics, all models are wrong, some models are useful. So let's keep that in mind. I'm not saying that the model's right about ranking Tennessee 9th and Cleveland 8th. I think it's a little bit high. We're trying to figure out the usefulness of the model, and it's done well on the whole. It's high on these 2 teams. We have to figure out why it's high on these 2 teams. You can kind of see a little bit on screen why Tennessee's pace is 24th, so it's going to bring those numbers down. Those offensive, defensive grades are pace adjusted. But their defense, after adjusting for pace, ranks number 3. Pass defense efficiency is number 9. Run defense efficiency number 3. So even aside from the pace, very good defense. Cleveland, also very good defense. Pass defensive efficiency ranks number 1. Run defensive efficiency number 13. Their grades are higher because their pace ranks number 1 according to my projections based off what we saw last year and this year combined, trying to project them going forward. So these 2 teams, the model is very high on them because of the defense. If you have seen either one of these teams play this year, you know it's not because of the offense. Cleveland's offense gets that grade because of the pace. Efficiency-wise, you know, they're not above average. And, of course, 100 is average, according to my scaling. And we saw Deshaun Watson, the reason the model was very hesitant to like him from day one here was exactly what we saw on Monday night. You know, he gave that game away with that, you know, whatever the heck you want to call it at the end of the game. The first pick 6 wasn't his fault as much. That was just bonkers weirdness. A double tipped pass right for a pick 6, but the back end of the game was rough. You know, Deshaun Watson's better than some of the quarterbacks in this league for sure, but you know, he's not helping them a ton offensively. And the biggest issue is Nick Chubb. And again, player-based model, Chubb's been removed from the team, and that really hurts. Drops Cleveland's running back game down to number 32. I had Chubb as the number 1 running back, according to the model. And that's not fantasy points. Fantasy points are a little bit different, right? You talk about receiving and that sort of stuff. And when I'm talking about value to the team, a little bit of pass blocking, right, matters to the grade of a running back because he can help, you know, block for your quarterback, things like that. Nick Chubb, I had as the best running back in football. Losing him is a tremendous loss to Cleveland. And the model still has him number 8 because they still can run block very well. So as bad as the model thinks Jerome Ford is, they still should have some holes for him. And that defense is just, the model just loves this defense. Even though they're playing at a faster pace, they're so efficient. I don't know what to make of these 2 teams. I think by the end of the season, we're going to look back, and my hunch is the model is probably going to be right on one of them, maybe half right on both of them. I'm not sure both of these teams. I'd be surprised if they finish top 10 where the model has them right now. But again, we have to remember that these rankings are changing by the day based off injuries. The right guy or the wrong guy gets hurt. Things go up and down, right? The Jets are a prime example of that. Going from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson completely changes the forecast of that team. You know, and every time we turn around, there's another injury like that, it seems like. So all those caveats to say, this is a pretty toss-up-y type game. You give Cleveland a slight edge for playing at home, but otherwise, I have no idea what's going to happen. All about the price. Plus 135 is probably worth an investment. This is another C-plus grade. It doesn't quite get to B grade value, but plus 135 for a Titans team that, you know, Tannehill can be decent enough. The Tennessee running game is pretty good. Their defense isn't that far behind Cleveland's either. Titans may be worth a stab here. Jake, what do you got for us?
Yeah. Can you tell me, do you have your defense broken down with the pass rush?
I do not have pass rush and pass defense. I combine them into just pass defense overall. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you saw this because the Steelers' defense isn't that great all the way around, but the fact that they can get pressure on the quarterback really throws Deshaun Watson away. And you saw that
they did really well
Chubb
up front, getting pressure on Watson. Absolutely.
And once Chubb went out, he looked lost. And I think you're going to see something very similar because they're coming on a short week, trying to prepare. At least they're at home, but trying to prepare for Derrick Henry is a monster in itself. That defense is going to be given all it can handle with him, and then the lightning with Tajay Spears. And then if Tannehill plays like he did last week and not week one, this offense can actually put up a little bit of points. But it's on the other side. I just don't know where Cleveland's going to go with the ball. Ford made that one run, which was fantastic, but I mean, he really didn't do much after that. The offense as a whole didn't. Anytime Deshaun Watson had pressure and had to move, it seemed like he was lost and confused. When after his suspension, he's just lost whatever he had going in Texas. I don't know if it's the change in style of offense where he was more pass heavy in Texas versus the more run heavy in Cleveland. I don't know if that's the big difference, but he just doesn't look like the same guy. He doesn't look like he's even running the same. I don't think Cleveland's going to be able to score enough to win this game.
Yeah, and Sideline had Cleveland 6th last week, so a little bit of a drop for them. Other teams have had injuries too, so it's not like they're the only ones. But I'm a little surprised personally that the rating stayed this high. I really thought it would drop a little bit lower. There's more to it than the rating, though. The problem with ratings, ratings versus rankings. The problem with rankings is if you think about running a race, if you just have who came in first, second, or third, you might miss did the guy in first win by a lot, and then third was right close to second, or was second right close to first, right? That sort of thing. And that's, I think, one of the things you're missing here, that Cleveland was like on the verge, basically, of it was almost like a top 6 last week, according to the model, and now they've dropped a lot further. It hasn't showed up quite in the rankings as much yet, but make no doubt about it, they lose a lot without Chubb in there. It changes. You're putting all the pressure on Watson now, who hasn't looked great doing it. And when they had the lead against Cincinnati, things were fine. They never really had that comfortable lead against Pittsburgh, possibly because of that weird play to start the game, put them in a hole from the start, and then they were never up by more than, they were never by, I believe, 7 or more. It was always, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing. It changes, puts more pressure on him, and I don't think that's a good thing necessarily. It feels like a battle of defenses, low-scoring type game. If there's points, it'll probably be because the pace of Cleveland really driving up the number of possessions. More possessions means someone's going to accidentally score versus, you can really kill the score of a game just by cutting the number of possessions, right? We talk about that with like Sam Houston in college football, right? That's their whole shtick. So it should be an interesting contest. We'll learn a lot, I think, about these two teams. Cleveland with their new look since Chubb, it sounds like he's done for the year. We'll learn a lot about Tennessee as well, who's I think a fascinating story to talk about. Watching them in week 1, and I mentioned this at the Discord as well, so I kind of gave them this heads up on it, and someone else who was a Titans fan or had looked into it has kind of agreed and mentioned about the comments from the coach that, watching the week 1, they just threw the ball way too much. They didn't run the ball very much, and they kind of got out of their game, and Tannehill's forcing passes, and it just looked awkward. And it sounds like the coach acknowledged that, and things got back right here in the second game. But that's a problem that's at least fixable. Now, you never know when the coach is going to just do the same thing or when the game plan goes awry. You just never know with those things. But they got they got one of the best running backs in football, obviously, and they got a guy who's insanely fast in Spears, and you're getting those guys the ball, tosses, handoffs, screen passes, and then you do some fakes to those guys. And those wide receivers that weren't really open at all in week 1 because there was really no threat of a running game because they kind of abandoned it, are now open. And that allows Tannehill to look good and become that efficient passer. And his grade on why he's so good isn't because he makes those sexy deep ball throws like a guy like Tua. It's that he's efficient. He doesn't make mistakes. He finds the open guy, that sort of thing. He needs that running game to get going to do that. If not, he's not good enough. He's not skilled enough to make those plays, to do the Patrick Mahomes type thing, right? His goodness and why the model likes him is he can take what's given to him and excel, but he's got to get those guys open. So what sort of game plan Tennessee employs against a really good Cleveland defense, I think is going to be fascinating too. So a lot will happen here. And all that to say, again, no idea what's going to happen. So plus 135 is worth a stab, because if I don't know what's going to happen, give me those plus odds all day of the week. Watch it, enjoy it, get your popcorn out, and in a coin tossy type game, plus 135 is going to build up for us in the long run.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, what, Cleveland wins that game if their offense doesn't show up on Monday? Like, it's just crazy to think about. But I just, like I said, I think if Henry gets rolling downhill, then the play action happens, and you have Treylon Burks, who isn't the greatest receiver, but you still have to respect his speed. And DeAndre Hopkins may be a step slower and not as good as he once was, but he's still probably top 20 in the league, because the dude just catches everything. It can be a very deadly offense if everything's going right.
One last one on this, and I mentioned this earlier, but in case you didn't hear me say it, viewer, pass defense efficiency for Cleveland, number 1, according to Sideline. Rush defense efficiency, number 13. I think that is a reason why the Titans have a chance in this game, because the weakness, if there is one, of the Cleveland defense is exactly what Tennessee should be trying to do. And if they can pound the ball on the ground, have that sort of success, that keeps them in it. And it's not like Cleveland offensively we think it's going to do a ton either. So that could be the difference in this game, is that Cleveland is set up to stop the pass. And they did that insanely well against the Bengals. And, they did it well against the Steelers. How good of a passing offense do the Steelers have? Questionable. They allowed that one big play, that one broken play. Otherwise, they shut them down. Different animal against Tennessee, because Tennessee, again, hopefully not trying to pass, they're trying to run, and that's where maybe you can make some headway against this defense. That'll take us to Houston and Jacksonville. Again, models not very high in Jacksonville. They were 26th last week. Now they're 27th. They did not look good against Kansas City. I don't know. Maybe they're better than this. The thing about Jacksonville is, when you look at their players, Trevor Lawrence is decent enough as a quarterback. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's in that chunk of quarterbacks where it's hard to say, is he better than Tua? Is he better than Mac Jones? Is he better than a Jared Goff? All those guys are, a Geno, a Stafford, they're all decent. They're all decent quarterbacks. They're all much better than that rookie quarterback crop, right? All those first and second year quarterbacks are terrible. They're all and they might be good one day, but for now they're all terrible, right? So Trevor Lawrence is a solid quarterback, but when you get past that, as much as Calvin Ridley looked great in week 1 against the Kansas City defense that has one really good player, didn't look very good, and there's a reason why. Even with him, the Jaguars wide receiver tight end grouping ranks 18th. Etienne's a good back. He's questionable, and that kind of matters as well, but good there. But I'm not a fan of this Jaguars offensive line, and that's, I think, what people miss when we have that group think we talked about at the start of the show, where you're hearing these talking heads. If you're just talking about Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley, got good tight end as well, and Etienne, you can talk yourself into this being a good offense. Their offensive line, I think, is terrible, and the Chiefs being able to dominate them on the front, front seven or whatever, I think that matters, right? So the model's not very high on their offensive line. Defensively for Jacksonville, 9th against the runs. They can stop the run a little bit. 23rd against the pass. Not a terrible defense. They're a little bit faster than average, so that drops. It's not the defense that's the problem. It's that the offensive line matters, and I think that's going to be the thing that bites them this season. The Texans, on the other hand, are only 30th because Carolina and Arizona are just terrible. That's the only reason the Texans are 30th, because the Texans aren't good by any stretch of the imagination, and I think other than those two teams, they're the clear next worst team. The Texans showed a pretty good ability, though, last week to play hard late and score late, and that matters in covering a big number. That's what we're going to go for here, is just try to cover a big number in 9.5. Jake, there's 3 ways that the Texans can win this bet, and that's what I like about it. Number 1, they might win the game. How likely is it they win? According to the model, 37%. Not overly likely. Home field advantage doesn't matter a ton in the NFL anymore. It's a small amount. Jaguars are the better team, mainly because Texans aren't very good. But weird things happen in football, right? There's 1 or 2 results every week that we're confused about. Texans could win this game back. Not likely. They could hang around in an ugly game and just cover this number. Or they could get a backdoor cover because they're clearly able to throw the ball relatively well against prevent defenses and score. And hey, if we're down 14 late in this game, we got a shot to win this. So 3 ways we can win this. A grade value on the Texans, not because I think the Texans are good. There's just a lot of ways we could win a number this big. Talk about, we're going to lay a number when it's the right call, like we think it is with the Niners. We're going to take a big number here. Doesn't mean the Texans can't lose by 10 or 14 or something like that. And they aren't good. I'm not trying to say they are. This is also more a play against the Jaguars. I think there's value fading them because I think that offensive line being so suspect is going to prevent their stars from doing what you would hope they would do. And that might prevent them from running away with this game. Jake, Texans plus 9.5 A grade. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we nailed it there at the end. I think the backdoor cover is going to be really alive here because, they're trying to get as much experience and confidence in Stroud as possible. They're going to be throwing the ball. They're going to play all the way through the last buzzer, and margin of victory really doesn't matter in the NFL whatsoever. So Jacksonville's going to be more than happy to let them throw it around at the end and score.
Because the Jaguars escape with a win. Who cares? We're 2-1. Move on to the next week, right?
Yep.
One step closer to winning the division.
2-1 and 2-0 in the division. They'd be more than happy with that. I think they've got a decent running back in Pierce. They've got I think
running back crew ranks 10th according to the model.
Yeah, and a decent offensive line, maybe not great, but I don't think this Jacksonville defense is one to really have to worry about. And I think the line is something that Trevor Lawrence has to run about. I just think this Jacksonville offense at the skill positions is sexy, right? With Trevor Lawrence and his flowing long hair and the college connection with
a good-looking man.
And he is. And Calvin Ridley coming back and that big week 1 and Zay Jones and the tight end. His name escapes me.
Ingram,
yep. They look good, but, man, Lawrence has to run for his life. They can't really get a running game going because the line's not stopping anybody. I think the backdoor cover is going to be alive here, or I think Houston might stay around longer than what most people think.
If Etienne doesn't play, the Texans might win this game. That is going to be huge. And the reason I say that, the Texans are bad on defense against the run. They grade out 27th best, which is 7th or 6th worst, 10th against the pass. So if you take away Etienne, who's a fantastic running back, and now you get to they can't really run block very well because Etienne's kind of doing it all himself, basically, out there. It's not like he's getting a ton of help. You take him out, the run game can't get going. The Texans are decent against the pass. This game's going to get uglied up, and they're going to be in this game. If Etienne plays, that's a tougher thing. But the good thing is if Etienne plays and he's a lot of that offense, that's going to tick that clock and minimize the number of possessions, which helps us cover a big number. So again, it's kind of either way we're okay. There's just a lot of ways that we can get to the win on this one. There's no locks in gambling, of course, but there's just a lot of ways we can win on such a big number, given the issues that Jacksonville has. If Etienne's perfectly healthy, that offensive line was a little bit better, you're talking about probably a ho-hum 17-point win, but there's just enough question marks that model says 3.5. That's probably a little bit low, but I would say on average, you're talking about this probably should be more like 6 than 9.5. I think that it's not like home field matters that much in the NFL, and especially no offense to anybody in Jacksonville, but it's not like they're known for having the same home field edge that you might have in a place like, say, New Orleans, right?
Or Kansas City or something that's
Kansas City, notorious. Yes, absolutely. Moving on, Buffalo and Washington. Jake, we haven't talked a lot of totals, except we're apparently just going to do this one every week. Washington over. It's just it is what it is. And there's a couple reasons why. Their pace, according to the model, ranks 12th. When you look at the offensive grades there in defense, it's that they're run-of-the-mill average. I think this over is less about Washington and more about Buffalo, who has a really good defense. So I want to make sure everyone catches that. Pace-adjusted defense is a 105. That's below average. And what that means is I expect Buffalo, on average, to allow more points per game on average than other teams. That doesn't mean their defense isn't good. I have their pace at number 6. their defense is pretty solid. Against the pass, ranked number 6th. Against the run, only 21st. That's not a bad defense. It's just when you combine that with the pace, they're going to give up some points. Their offense is insanely good, and you combine that with the pace, and they're going to put up some points. So this is, again, I think a little bit less about Washington and more about Buffalo. Model says 28-21 is about what we'd expect. Whether it's 28-21, whether it's 31-21, 27-20, there's a lot of those scores in there that seem very reasonable. We expect a decent number of possessions, a lot of scoring from Buffalo, over 44 being the key number in the NFL. I cannot believe that this is not 45.5. The fact that it's 44 blows my mind. Model says an average of 49.2 points. Jake, we didn't quite get Washington's over week 1. Felt like we should have. Tons of field goals. At the end of the game, could have kicked a field goal, would have got it for us. Didn't quite get there. Got the Washington over easy last week. Let's see if we can make it 2 out of 3. What do you say?
Yeah, I think like everybody knows about the Buffalo's offense and Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. I think Cook is the real X factor there. When he gets going as fast as he is, that offense can really hum. And against a very average Washington defense, they're going to be able to put up points. I can very easily see them getting the 30 plus in this one. And look, I talked about it week 1. I've talked about it week 2. Sam Howell is better than we give him credit for. He's making some good throws. He's got 2 really good receivers, and Terry McLaurin and John Dotson. And then, I mean, Ryan Robinson Jr. looks like he's going to be a good back. Antonio Gibson is solid too. They've got enough weapons on offense that I think they'll get 1 or 2, and especially with the way Allen plays, there's a good chance for a turnover or a dumb sack.
He can be reckless.
Yeah, a little bit reckless, a little bit of field position, get some extra points for Washington, and I think they're in the same boat as Houston is, where they're going to try to get Howell as many throws out there this year as possible to really see what they've got. So I think extra points in the garbage time is going to be good. I think over 44 is a no-brainer.
Yeah, and like you said, the Eagles and the Cowboys, at least right now, look to be 2 of the top 5 teams in football. I think I've got them first and third. And I think last week the Cowboys were first, week 1, and now I think the Eagles are first. They're just going to be jostling because of injuries and who's questionable and whatnot, that sort of thing. But it's all going to be jostling around. You got to – Washington knows they ain't going to win the division, right? That's not going to happen. They have an outside shot at the playoffs. I'm ranked 17th. You know, if things break their way, they could make the playoffs. So it's not so much that it's a lost season for them. But I think you're right, Sam Howell. I think, and I just eyeballing it here, I have him, I believe, as the best of the young quarterbacks of that group. I have him still, pretty far behind most of the established guys, but of even the guys like Jordan Love, those sort of guys like that, and obviously the Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, Ritter, Bryce Young, all those guys like that. He's clearly ahead of those guys. So I think he's the leader of that crew for now, which makes sense. We saw what he did in North Carolina was fantastic. And so, good enough, to not – you have a little bit of fear when you take an over. If you've got a guy like Bryce Young, we'll talk about the Panthers and their issues later. But, it's a situation that if you're playing the over, you can't feel great because even if it's garbage time, you're like, I don't know if they can do anything, right? But Sam Howell's good enough. Washington's offense good enough that even in garbage time, they got a chance to put up some points in case we're needing that late score. I don't think we are. I think we're going to get this, late third quarter, if I had to guess. I just don't know why this number is so low. Buffalo's been running and gunning. And like you said, they've got just such a good offense. You talked about James Cook, Latavius Murray, and Damian Harris all grade out really well according to the model. That is a 3-headed beast at running back. Model loves them and grades them out. Overall, according to all running back groupings, as the second best running back duo/trio in the NFL. And of course, Josh Allen is one of the top 3 quarterbacks. I've got him number 1. The difference between Allen, Burrow, and Mahomes is rounding error. All 3 are clearly better than everybody else. But I mean, you got one of the top quarterbacks, maybe the top quarterback. You got number 2 for running back, and number 7 for wide receiver, tight ends, number 4 pass blocking. They struggle a little bit run blocking, but they're made up for that with all the talent back there. This offense just rocks and rolls. They play fast. It just leads to a lot of points. Again, why this number's at 44 on such a key number, blows my mind, but let's take advantage of it. A-grade pick. The A-grade total has been doing really well. Hopefully that keeps on going. Speaking of Carolina, look, I'm sure that all those guys on Carolina are really nice people. I'm sure, maybe they aren't. I don't know. Bryce Young, he might be a very nice young man. I have him ranked 63rd, and I only grade out the 2 deep on quarterbacks, which is 64 quarterbacks. That's not good. But here's the thing: is it's not just him. Their pass blocking ranks 27th, and he was just running for his life. It seemed like against the Saints here on Monday night in a game that was just an abomination to football. It kind of made me feel like we need to contract 2 teams and go back to 30 with that one. He doesn't have a lot of guys getting open. Wide receivers and tight ends are ranked number 20, and that even seems generous based off what we saw against the Saints. The Saints have a decent defense for sure, but it looked like he couldn't get any time to throw. The receivers weren't getting open whatsoever. And on top of that, he wasn't doing well when he had a chance anyway. I mean, it was just a disaster of an offense. Their defense isn't really much better. I think it looked better because the Saints have their own offensive issues. But Carolina, by the hair of their chinny chin chin, ranks, as you can see on screen, number 32. They're actually worse than Arizona right now. And that kind of blows my mind given how far ahead of everybody else Arizona was to start the season. The Colts flirted with them in week 1 without Moss running back. And of course, now that he's back, they've jumped back up to respectable and you saw what a difference he made for them having just anything at running back. Because week 1, they had just nothing down to 3rd string and 4th string guys who were terrible. But Carolina, I think that was a 1-week aberration for Indianapolis to be that bad. I don't think it's an aberration for Carolina. I think we're talking about a bottom 2 team all season, them in Arizona. And Arizona, once they get Kyler Murray back, will leapfrog them and it'll just be poor Carolina by themselves. They look terrible. Model says they have a 22% chance of winning. I don't know, that feels a little high personally. Like if they play this game 5 times, I don't really think Carolina wins one of them. I mean, how many times they have to play this game before Carolina wins? And not that Seattle's great. I've only got them ranked number 20. I think Seattle's just decent. But I mean, how many times they have to play in Seattle? Again, one of those places that does notoriously have a pretty good home field edge. How many times they have to play this for Carolina to win? I'm thinking 10, 15 before they actually win a game. It just doesn't seem likely. Well, the Seahawks are at minus 255, just ekes into B-grade territory. We talked a lot about Carolina. Not much to say about Seattle. Just run-of-the-mill ho-hum. Geno Smith's decent enough. Had a good year last year. Kind of more towards the top of that tier of quarterbacks that I mentioned, kind of between 10 and 30 or so, or 10 and 25 or so, that are just, they're all solid. He's kind of towards the top of that. But other than that, I mean, there's just nothing really special about any of this Seattle team. They're just kind of okay. Their defense is probably worse than that rating. Their pace is pretty slow. And so their defense isn't that good. Otherwise, they're just ho-hum, and they should be able to take care of a really bad Carolina team in a game that, oh my goodness, don't watch this unless someone is paying you to do so because it's going to be terrible. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, this is definitely a fantasy game, right? You're hoping Lockett or DK takes one deep. If you've got one of those, or Kenneth Walker, yeah. You're thinking you're looking at him. There's nobody on Carolina's side you're looking at. I mean, maybe Thielen, because he just seems to be the king of putting up a little random touchdown here or there, but I don't see it really happening. Seattle team at home, very, very good. Very, very good. On the road, Geno Smith, as long as he's able to make the right decisions, and which he looked a lot better in week 2, and Kenneth Walker being able to run the ball, they're going to take a lot of pressure off their defense. That's very because they can just eat up all the clock, especially in this game. I think Seattle's going to be one of those teams they're going to beat teams that they should beat and lose to teams they should lose to. They're never going to surprise you. You know exactly about where they're at, and that's just their role this year.
Yeah, Seattle made us look real smart last week as we got a big plus, 210 odds on them, and the odds came down throughout the week, but it was still pretty good value on the Seahawks there. I think you're right. I think they're just run-of-the-mill. And honestly, I love teams like that. I love teams that you know what you're going to get from. You feel confident about, smaller confidence intervals, narrower, error bars, right, is more fun for us as sports bettors than the teams that you don't know what you're going to get. But the weakness of the Seattle team is their defense, passing defense efficiency, number 22, run defense efficiency, number 28. But this Carolina team isn't going to be the one to take advantage of that. And so that's the thing where, like you said, a good offense is going to be able to put points up on them and force them to score with you. And if you're good enough, like you said, that's going to be a recipe you can beat Seattle because they won't be able to score with you. And if not, then they'll be able to score. But Carolina just isn't likely to be that. Maybe we get one of those, again, according to the model, 1 out of 5 times that Carolina wins. Again, I feel like more like 1 out of 10. Maybe we get one of those weird cases, but Seattle here, a little bit of a price, but not that steep here at 255. I think it's pretty strong play. Again, remember, if you are not familiar with the scaling that we do here, to the very intro where we get the music, I outlined this, that the risk plus win amount adds up to a certain amount. And that helps us play bigger favorites more than flat betting. Flat betting is great if everything that you play is between minus 130 and plus 130. If not, what you're going to have happen with flat betting, and some of you know this, what you're going to have happen is when you play underdogs, you're going to be boom or bust. And if they hit, you're going to be great. And if they don't, you're going to lose all your money really fast. And if you play favorites, you're going to be boom or bust. If they're winning, you're going to go great. And if you lose one too many, you're going to lose all your bankroll. This minimizes that by doing this scaling system and allows us to play some of these bigger favorites or bigger dogs. And so that's why, even though minus 255 is pretty big, I think it's still worth the play here and something that you can utilize using that scaling that I like here. Showing the Seahawks in the late afternoon time slot, which takes us to Sunday night, Pittsburgh and Las Vegas. I feel like Las Vegas is another kind of one of those ho-hum teams. There's just not a lot great to talk about. Their defense also not very good. Their pace even slower. They've set up to be look like maybe the slowest team in football. So that helps their defense grade out because their pace is just so dang slow. But otherwise, offensively, they've got some guys that can throw the ball too. They grade out okay at all the position groups. Garoppolo's fine enough. It's just, by going so slow, they're not going to score a lot of points. But they definitely seem to be a team that the pace flips from what you'd expect. Pretty good offense. Pretty bad defense, but the pace balances that out. But otherwise, just run of the mill. I've got them at 18. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, I've got at 28. I know they won Monday, but that was insanely fluky. I don't think this Pittsburgh team is very good right now with all the injuries that they've got. In general, I think this team is probably better by a decent amount, but they've got just so many key injuries right now. They kind of fall to the bottom. Once they're healthy, they get healthy later on in the season, maybe things will be different. But right now, you can't be overly excited about their defense, which has now fallen more towards the, middle bottom of the pack because of some of their injuries. And then offensively, we talked about it last week, losing Johnson really hurts them. Their wide receivers grade out now number 29. Kenny Pickett grades out as the 32nd best quarterback. That's not at a 32. That's at a 64. There are some backups that I definitely think are better than Kenny Pickett. And I'd rather have Kenny Pickett than Bryce Young, but he's still not done a great job for him, and I'm not overly optimistic about him. Their running game, offensive line doesn't grade out well. They're just banged up and in trouble. Las Vegas at minus 137. B grade, just a lot of value here, I think, on a team that's 64% likely to win. I don't quite know why we're getting such a good price. A grade price would be minus 119, so we're almost 20 cents away from that. But to me, I'm surprised we're getting such value on the Sunday night game. Usually I feel like the Sunday night games researched a little bit more, that there's not quite as much value. Seems to be a lot of value on this one. I don't know if it's because of Pittsburgh, what happened last week, we're coming off of, I guess now yesterday against Cleveland or what, but I'm just not sold on this Pittsburgh team. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, that defense, they can rush the passer very well. Anybody could if you had put TJ Watt on their team. He's very, very good.
It's true.
But, man, that offense, they're rough. The line does Pickett no favors. Najee Harris and the running backs does him no favors, and then take out his top weapon. And I think Pickens is a stud, but I don't know that I don't know that he's a number one receiver guy. I think with all the attention's on him, I don't think he's going to do near as well. But there's nobody really beside him to help out here. It's just, Vermuth has not been great this year. I don't know if that's him. I don't know, or the offense. But you would think a tight end would have been an easy outlet. He's just either not getting open or I don't really know there. I just don't think they're going to get the same mistakes that Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns made from Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he's not the greatest talent in the world, but he seems to not make stupid plays, and that's probably thanks to coming up with Bill Belichick. I mean, he's got some decent receivers. He's got a good running back in Josh Jacobs if they can get him going.
Very rusty early on in the season, very rusty. But yes, a guy who has the talent if he can figure it out.
Yeah, and so I think the Raiders are a very good play here, especially on like short week for Pittsburgh. I mean, I know it's not so much since they're going from Sunday night; it's not that big of a deal. But I think that's just going to be plenty of time for the Raiders to take advantage of this.
And you mentioned the wide receivers for Pitt. The model is very confused as to who it likes more between Allen Robinson, the second, Calvin Austin, the third, and Miles Boykin, I guess the first. We're taking this theme, but all three of those guys just run-of-the-mill meh receivers, and none of them able, right now at least, looking like great threats. Now, that doesn't mean they can't change as the season goes along, but they're going to need one, maybe two of those guys to really step forward and fill the gap left by Deontay Johnson, because he was their number one receiver. He was the go-to guy, and without him, the pass game just looks kind of anemic. And again, you combine that with the line hasn't looked good, the running back situation, grades out in the bottom third as well. And on top of it, like I said, I don't think Kenny Pickett's great. Kenny Pickett is the guy he's one of those guys that's in between that mix of quarterbacks that I said between like 10 and 25 that are all kind of okay, good quarterbacks. He's not as bad as those rookies, but he's in between the two where it's like, yeah, he's better than Desmond Ridder. He's better than CJ Stroud. He's better than, that sort of thing, but he's not as good as a guy like Garoppolo, et cetera, in that middle group. And so when you combine a slightly weaker quarterback with you lost your number one receiver, no one's really stepped up to fill that void. Not a great running game, not a great offensive line. It's a recipe to not score a lot of points. I will say, if you're a Pittsburgh fan, your hope is you played a Cleveland defense that might be one of the top 5 defenses in football this year, and you played a 49ers defense that might be one of the top 5 defenses in the league this year. And this Las Vegas defense is not that good. They're grayed out better on a pace-adjusted basis. They're not going to allow points if they keep playing just as freakishly slow as they're going. But they're not that good. That's your hope. I think the problem is, and the reason we have this model is to help us to discern, was it just the defenses or was it the offense too? And I think the answer is it's a lot of the offense as well for Pittsburgh. And those problems, I think, are magnified against those better defenses, but I still think they're going to exist against Las Vegas. A Las Vegas team that has enough offensive weapons that, as long as they can just, not get TJ Watted, right, then they should be able to score, especially at home. Obviously, though, he's a game changer, but I think this Las Vegas offense also a lot better than Cleveland once Chubb went down. They've just got more weapons. Again, assuming we have faith that Jacobs will get going despite his incredibly slow start. So minus 137 for Las Vegas. Be a great pick for us there. Which takes us to the 2 Monday night games. Hopefully they are better than what happened in the 2 Monday night games in week 2. They can't be much worse because of how just disastrous those games were. First one's Philly at Tampa. Philly, according to the model, barely number 1. Talked about that earlier. Fairly fast. Tampa Bay also fairly fast. Expecting a lot of points in this game. But in reality, I just think Tampa Bay is going to be overmatched. Baker Mayfield profile's kind of similar to the Kenny Pickett, can have a good game, but overall definitely weaker than most of your solid run-of-the-mill quarterbacks. Model's not very high on him. You've got a Tampa Bay defense that grades out relatively well against the pass, not as much against the run. And of course, Philly loves to pass it, but they've also got the number 1 run blocking unit, according to Sideline. Hurts being able to use his feet. There's just so many ways this offense can beat you. So it doesn't really matter what you're good at stopping. The Eagles offense can figure out a way to attack you and make you pay, almost like the Bill Belichick kind of thing, right? They've just got so many weapons. It doesn't matter what you try. They're going to exploit your weaknesses one way or the other. Tampa Bay, I'm just not very high on. Model says the Eagles win 77% of the time. So minus 240 gets us B grade value. Jake, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I just think they're the class of the league come offense. Like, it's unreal. You went from throwing the ball all over week 1 to DeAndre Swift, who probably very average running back, looked like a god in week 2.
That's what happens when you have the number 1 ranked run blocking unit with you.
Yeah, so it's just like okay, so you want to take the pass away? We're just going to hand the ball off to DeAndre Swift, and then you can, and then you get a deep shot to either AJ Brown or Devontae Smith.
Yeah,
it's just not fair. Tampa Bay's defense is not going to be good.
You can't spy Hurts because if you do, you're taking one more guy away to defend the pass. But if you don't spy him, then he can run all over you, right? It's like they've got so many weapons. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they are very, very good. I've been impressed with Baker, but I think like you're comparing Kenny Pickett and him. I think the difference is you have guys like Mike Evans and Godwin out there that really make a difference. Their run game has not been as good as I thought this year. I thought White was going to come in and he showed some flashes last week, but Philly's defense is good. Like they're very good. They can get after you, get after the quarterback. They can guard. Darius Slay is a great corner. I just don't see where Tampa's going to be able to do much here. I think there's going to be a lot of points because I think Philadelphia's going to do most of the scoring, and they're going to be able to do whatever they want. Tampa will score once or twice, and I think but it's not going to be enough. It's going to be mainly in garbage time.
You've got you talked about Tampa running game, 28th ranked set of running backs, 31st ranked run blocking. So yeah, not a lot happening there. Running the ball. Not really, pretty balanced defense for Philly, pretty solid on both sides, whether it's both methods, whether it's passing or running. But yeah, I think the biggest thing here is it's just going to be, this is not the defense to stop the Eagles. It's really hard to stop them in general, but you have to be a top-notch unit, and the Tampa Bay defense isn't that. I'm really curious to see Philly if they actually go out there and have a week where they just open up a can. This feels like maybe it's it, playing on Monday night. Here, the first game, they looked great to start off with, but that weather got weird. It's also really hard to coach against Bill Belichick and to play against Bill Belichick. We've talked about it, right? Whatever you think of the guy, he's just a genius coach, and he makes it tough. He always tries to. He's going to make you earn it, and the teams that beat the Patriots earn it, right? And you saw what they did against the Dolphins right here on Sunday night. More or less, and how they've always just been able to take Tyreek Hill basically out of his game and say something else is going to beat us. And so if you beat them, you've earned it. You can't just go to autopilot, right? And then there was the weather in that game for the Eagles, so it's like that was a wonky game. Then you play on Thursday, and we covered that game right. Thursday games are always wonky. They're always a little bit, like you said, everything gets amplified because it's this vanilla game package. So if you're better than the other team and everything, and they don't have time to prep, you're probably going to kill them, and it's probably going to be a boring game. If it's two defensive teams, it's going to be real ugly and low scoring. That one we were like, hey, there's two good offenses, but it's just Thursday's different. We haven't yet seen Philly just look like the team this year, and I think they might be, but I have a good excuse for them in the first two games. This one's one where I'm really expecting that effort. I'm not saying you should lay the points or not. Football gets weird. We're stick with money lines, but if you were to lay some points, this one seems like one maybe where it's worth doing it because this seems like the time for the Eagles to demonstrate to everybody that they are that team. In the NFL, right, we know you're playing 17 games. You're not going to look like the Super Bowl champion all 17 regular season games. Some of those games, you just got to go out there and get the job done. But we know that the true Super Bowl contenders, other than the ones who just kind of get healthy and hot at the right time, tend to look like the world champions, in a third to half of those games. They just dominate. First two ones, I can tell you why they didn't dominate. This one, this is the time here, extra time to game plan, extra time to get healthy. They had a bunch of guys on the defense, questionable now, right? That sort of thing. All that extra time, this is the time for them to dominate and show us that they are one of the top teams in football. They are a true Super Bowl contender again. We all think they are, and it seems like this is the time for them to show it. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but it just feels like the Eagles, this is their time to shine, really.
Yeah, I kind of expected an AJ Brown game here. We haven't seen one yet. He's been relatively quiet. I expect him to kind of go to him a little bit, get him involved. And if that happens, that means Devontae Smith's also going to get involved, and it's just going to be terrible for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and like you said, you start running too far backward to worry about those guys. And Swift is, like you said, decent enough with that running game. There'll be holes all over the field, and he'll be able to get 5 yards past the line of scrimmage before anybody could even touch him. Right, and that makes you look like you said good. So, yeah, just an embarrassment of riches there. Which takes us to the nightcap of the two games: Rams at the Bengals. A game where the Bengals. Another one of those teams, 0-2, did not expect that. The Rams, what do we make of the Rams, right? Cooper Kupp out is a massive loss. Now, all of a sudden, what exactly is happening with Cam Akers? I don't like.
I think he's wanting a trade. Like, he came in asking for a trade last year, and now he seems to be going that way.
Why is he playing week 1? And then apparently this happens. He's not playing week 2. Like, was it a genius move to say, let's let them both play? And because I think the backup got, about as many touches in week 1. Oh, we think he's good, so we can go with him. And then it's just a weird situation, I guess is all I'm trying to say. Like, I could read the same things, but it's weird. And because usually you see what happened with Jonathan Taylor or, Jones for Kansas City, right? Those are the type, Chris Jones. Those are the things that you're used to happening. This one after week 1 was like, wait, what? Like, they've obviously got a lot of talent. Stafford looks pretty good again. Threw a couple picks last week. I think it's the Niners, who again we talked about, one of the top teams. The injuries, and again Cooper Kupp, because as good as Nakua has been, you still want Cooper Kupp out there, right? Has them ranked 23rd right now. They're a team that's good enough and has enough talent to be a playoff contender. But if Kupp misses enough time, they're going to end up being with another lost season. And I think, frustratingly, another lost season for Matthew Stafford, who, is towards the end of his career now. He only has so many good seasons left him. I don't know how many. I don't see him pulling a Tom Brady and playing until he's, on Social Security, right? Maybe he does. And so if you're a Rams fan, it's got to be kind of frustrating because they're good enough, but yet right now the product put on the field probably isn't. They're good enough to hang around, but I don't know if they're going to get over the hump there with who they've got on the field. But the Bengals are not in a drastically different boat. If being in fear of falling to 0-3, we talked about that earlier, the 0-3 thing, right? Not ideal. Burrow now is questionable. Apparently with a calf issue again or whatnot. I don't know if he's listed as questionable as much as it is. We just don't know if that's going to affect him. We don't know if that's affecting his performance. We know without him playing in the preseason, maybe that made him a little rusty, but he hasn't looked great. I mean, that's so I'm using questionable, not in the literal term as much as I'm just saying you got to be concerned about that. A Bengals team that we expect to be a lot better ranks 11th. According to the model right now, which is just shockingly low. I don't know. The talent seems to be there for the Bengals, but for both of these teams really, but for one reason or another, it just hasn't looked great for either one of them. Someone's got to win this one. Model thinks the Bengals are 71% likely to win this. Model is saying the Rams issues are hurting them a little bit more than the Bengals issues are. Bengals at home, extremely likely to win. -135 is an A grade. Jake, what's your take here on the finale of week 3?
Look, I mean, the Bengals did it last year, went 0-2, and then went on a ridiculous run. I don't know if they're going to go on that same run, but I think we kind of saw it in the second half of that game. Joe Burrow kind of finding a little bit of a groove there with T. Higgins. They're going to get Jamar Chase here. I just don't think that the Rams have the defense to get in the way of this offense. And, I guess the biggest difference I'm seeing with Nakua and Kupp is Kupp houses some of those. Nakua doesn't seem to be able to do that. And I think that really hurts their offense because Kupp just made plays. And that's not a knock on Nakua. Yeah. That's just Kupp is
I think everyone knows that Cooper Kupp is the most valuable wide receiver in football at this point, just the things he does. Yeah, so it's I don't think anyone's going to hear that and think you're insulting Nakua as good as he's been, right? It's Cooper Kupp's in a class of his own, basically, as a wide receiver.
Yeah, and then the whole running back, that's a weird situation. And the whole Facebook thing that Matthew Stafford had to do to learn this, players' faces. You had to have a book that's just a weird. There's just a lot of weird things happening out there in LA. But I mean, they're a solid team, but I just don't. I think this Bengals team is going to get clicking here. Joe Mixon kind of looks interested and involved. And I think once Jamar Chase gets rolling with his offense, I think you're going to see a team that looks similar to what the one did last year.
And you point out this Rams defense grades out 12th against the run. Grades out 29th against the pass. And so that's going to be the thing. The Bengals, of course, have weapons everywhere, but as we all know, they're built to pass. They grade out better pass blocking than run blocking. Their wide receiver tight end group grades out better than their running back group. And obviously with Joe Burrow there, if he can get going, and eventually he will, it's just what's exactly going on with his health, with his rust, that sort of thing. That's the big question. But if they get that passing game going, the Rams are not built to stop the pass. And so that is going to be the difference maker for this one, is that, the Bengals might not have a lot of good time running the ball based off of the matchup, but that's not going to, if you're a Bengals fan, you're saying that's fine. That's not our game plan. Right. It's just you got to get that offense going. And like maybe you're right. Maybe, T. Higgins, of course, had a fantastic game. I believe I guess I know that all too well since you and I played each other in fantasy. I know that all too well as well. That was very frustrating to see his points continue to rise like that in our fantasy matchup. But, this Rams defense. And the defense probably not quite as bad as that grade. Again, their pace ranks really high as well. But, again, not good against the pass, and that's the biggest thing here that the Bengals should be able to take advantage of. Extra day of rest might come into play as well. That could always help, just healing everything up, given, again, whatever's going on with Burrow. So Bengals minus 135, A grade wraps us up. And that is our show, Jake. Do you have any parting words for the viewer here for Week 3 NFL?
I know just that I am happy to be 2-0 in our league, and with the most points scored, I look like I'm going to clean it up, and I love it.
I feel like I have nothing to say, which just means we should go to the outro music. So we'll wrap up with that.